Today we're covering dividing a decimal by a decimal. So again, this isn't going to be much different. We're just kind of building on what we've already been doing. So last time we discussed how to divide decimals, or divide using decimals. Today we're going one step further, and we're actually going to divide using by decimals. So taking a look at this, we have 1.44 divided by 1.2. So again, we write that as we normally would with the first number on the inside, second number on the outside. Now how this changes is that we have this decimal on the outside and we want to get rid of that decimal on the outside. So what I do is I figure out, okay, how many do I have to move this to move that decimal so it's behind the whole number? And looking at that, I move this number the same amount of places. So now my decimal, and again we move that straight to the top. So now my number becomes 12 into 14.4, and that number goes up here. So all we're going to do is shift that decimal point this way, but then we shift this decimal point the same direction. So 12 goes into 14 one time, subtract, bring down the 4, 12 goes into 24 two times. When we subtract, we get 0, and so our answer is 1.2. And if you were to multiply 1.2 by 1.2, we'd get back to 1.44. Let's try another one. So for instance, let's take 75.6 divided by 0.15. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this, and again, first number goes on the inside, the number goes on the outside. So now again we want to look at how many decimal places do I have to move so that this decimal point falls on the back end of the number. So I move it 2 places, which means I have to move this 2 places. But now there's an extra place, and so I'm going to add the 0 and move that up. So 15 goes into 75 5 times. 5 times 15 actually is 75. So that gets us 0. We bring down the 6. It's going to go in there 0 times. So 0 times 15, 0. We bring down the extra 0. 15 goes into 6 4 times. So 4 times 15 is 60. Subtracting it 0, which means our answer is just 504, which makes sense because this is a really small number with a really big number, so it's going to go in there 504 times. So just because you divide a decimal by decimal doesn't mean you automatically get a decimal. So there's actually a lot going on in here. So decimal divided by decimal doesn't always equal a decimal. That doesn't have to happen. But also, here when we move this out, sometimes you're going to have too many places, so you have to add the 0. And again, keeping in mind the number of places you move it on the outside is the same number of places you have to move it on the inside. So again, let's take a look. And that was example 2. I forgot to put it back in my example box, but make sure you label that as example number 2. Alright, example number 3. So I'm going to give you 2 different ones here, and I'm going to have you guys actually go ahead and figure these out. So let's go ahead and do 16.9 divided by 0.13. And then part B, we'll do 63.02 divided by 0.17. So take a few moments, figure those out, and then I'll give you the answers. I do want to point something out on this particular example. Notice that we're out of numbers, and we already have 0, which means it went in evenly, but our decimal point is over still one more place. So what that means is we have to fill that in with a 0. Even though we're still going to get 0 and it doesn't change anything, we want to make sure that our answer is actually 130, not 13. Okay, so make sure that you fill in case that happens sometimes where you have the extra space, you have to fill that in with a 0. So the answer for part A there is 130. In that second example, we ended up getting to a point where two numbers were repeating. As you notice, we had the 7, we got 0 then, but then when I did it again, I was getting that same process. So again, it was going to be 7, 0, so this 0, so you don't have to use the bar notation, but remember that's something I referenced that we're going to get to later on. And so that bar notation is something that you might want to notice, but it wasn't important there. The answer here then would be 370.70. And again, once you start to notice that repetition pattern, you don't have to go out the full way to the 3 decimal points. Alright, one last example I do want to cover. It's going to be a word problem. So again, it's applying what we're doing here. We're just going to be picking out the numbers. Okay, so if we have something like so here's an example problem. So it's asking us, it says the track team had to run a combined total of 22.5 miles. If each member ran 1.5 miles, how many members are on the track team? So we're going to look here and we're going to do our division. So the first thing we want to figure out is what are we dividing? Well, there's a total of 22.5 miles. And we want to divide that by 1.5 to figure out how many total people ran. Because if you think backwards, 1.5 times what is going to get us to 22.5. So to undo that and kind of go backwards of that, we're going to figure out that 22.5 times 1.5, or excuse me, 22.5 divided by 1.5 will give us that answer. So if we go ahead and take that in, we put in 22.5 divided by 1.5. Remember again, you want to move this decimal over so it's at the end of the number, which means I also want to move so it's at the end of this number. 15 goes into 22 one time, so I subtract and I get 7. 15 goes into 75 5 times, and we get 0. So there were 15 track members. And I'm sorry for that kind of cutting off there at the end, but the only thing you missed was the 0. So there were 15, so then you'd want to say a statement of there were 15 members on the track team. And so that concludes this lesson. We are going to do one more lesson in this chapter, in this unit, on dividing using decimals with converting from a fraction to a decimal. And so that's something that we're going to use division of, and again we're going to end up getting decimals. So we will be working on converting that next time. But for now we're going to go ahead and stop here.